And welcome to the opening of our exhibit of Neruda and Siqueiros. My name is Aaron Navarro. I'm on the history faculty here, and I'm the director of the Mexico, the Americas, and Spain program, the MAS program that's put on this Lennox and Alvarez seminar series. Our art opening tonight is one of the capstone events for this whole series, and so it's wonderful to see all of you here tonight. One of the great joys of life is to have interesting friends, and looking around the room, faculty, staff, students, there are all kinds of interesting Trinity friends here, and also, I'm happy to say, lots of interesting San Antonio friends, community friends, who have chosen to spend their Friday night with us here. And so, thank you all for being here. Welcome to our opening, and thanks for coming and helping us eat up this food and drink our wine. I want to thank a couple of people before we get on with our short program here this evening. Some of the people that made this possible. In no particular order, but sort of the nuts and bolts of these things don't happen by accident. Here in the gallery, Randy Wallace and his intern Clay Reuter. Paul Fairbacher, our videographer here, who's shot all of our events wonderfully throughout this series. Hector Gomez, the AV tech who is over here.
Let's see you. That's Randy Wallace over there in the corner. Randy,
right,
come out
there
so
they
people
are.
can see you.
Hector, who's done all of our sound for these different events, very nice. The MAS interns, Daniela Paz, who's sort of hiding here by the pillar, and Vanessa Ortiz, who's over here
Wave at
in the
everybody
corner.
so they can see you.
All of the great publications and flyers and everything that looks nice about the program, you can thank them. It's their work, not mine. Also, Irma de Leon, who's the office manager in the sociology and anthropology department, has done a lot of the back office work, the financial stuff, for this series. And we couldn't have done this without these people helping us. So a round of applause for all the friends here. There are also a couple of other people to thank, our benefactors, right? The namesakes of the Lennox and Alvarez seminar series. The Martha, David, and Bagby Lennox Foundation that has supported Trinity so much over the years and underwrites this series every year. That now this year has been Chile Canta al Mundo. Thank you to the Lennox Foundation. Also thank you to the Carlos and Malu Alvarez family for their support through ongoing funding for the MAS program in particular, and also because Mr. Alvarez is the owner of the Gambrinas company, the Shiner Bock that you all hold came from his warehouse. He gave us that too.
As did the wine.
And the wine came from him as well, so he gives and gives and gives. Thank you to the Lennox and Alvarez family. Finally, to make this particular exhibit possible, there were two people who really were important here. One, Bill Fisher, who's going to speak to us here in a moment, who has an amazing collection of Chile stuff and Neruda stuff and other kinds of rare things that I could talk to you about all night, but won't. An amazing collection, some of the treasures he shared with us here tonight. So thank you to Bill for bringing us these things and sharing them with us. Also thank you to Marion Ettinger of the San Antonio Museum of Art, who unfortunately could not be with us here tonight. He's traveling, who made possible these black and white images that you will see here in the gallery. These are on special loan from the San Antonio Museum of Art. So without Marion Ettinger and Bill Fisher, we wouldn't have these treasures to look at tonight. So a special round of applause for our donors. Once again, welcome to the exhibit. I'm going to ask my colleague and co-organizer, David Spiener, to come up to introduce the rest of our program. David.
Great. Thank you so much for everybody being here. Well, we're going to start off, we can't have an exhibit and an event about Pablo Neruda and his work without some poetry, don't you think? And it turns out we're very, very fortunate. Yes, a round of applause for poetry. ¡Viva la poesía! And we're very, very fortunate to have some wonderful poets among us here at Trinity. And in particular, we have Professor Jenny Brown, who is a renowned poet in our neck of the woods. Her latest book of poetry is called Dear Stranger. She's also another Neruda-phile, I guess we could call you that. And she has been working with her students over the last couple of weeks, studying Neruda and writing poetry related to Neruda, etc. And I want to bring her up and maybe a student or two with her to share what they've been working on with you.
So when David do you ever teach Neruda? I mean, I just nodded and then I nodded again, because the difficult thing about teaching Neruda is there are so many Nerudas. There's the Neruda of love poems, there's the Neruda of odes, there's the Neruda of the Canto General, there's the Neruda of great political epics. But the book that I love to teach, and the book that my students have been working with most intimately, is a tiny little book called The Book of Questions. And it's a book in which Neruda asks, it's 70 little quatrains of sort of paradoxical questions. And I remember being 19 years old and stumbling upon it and reading these 4 lines. Tell me, is the rose naked, or is that her only dress? Why do trees conceal the splendor of their roots? Who hears the regrets of the thieving automobile? Is there anything in the world sadder than a train standing in the rain? You know, and I tell my students, do you think he wants us to answer these questions? And after a while, we shake our heads no. So what does he want? And I don't pretend that we know the answer, but one of the reasons that I return to this Neruda is I think he suggests a world of relationships, of complex and surprising relationships between our hearts and our minds, between religion and politics, between our bodies and the earth. And so what I'm going to leave you with tonight is a short collaborative poem that my 2 introductory poetry classes made, in which they wrote in this mode. So it's a series of short paradoxical questions. And then I'm going to invite 2 students up, Marika Becker and Daniel Garrick, who each have written short, sort of responsive poems to Neruda's kind of question. So first, here's our poem to evoke Neruda in this room. If the sun kisses us, does that justify our death? Where do June bugs go when it's no longer June? Are these nightmares handmade or factory produced? Who conducts the symphony of nature? Will the child's lost balloon discover the truth? If birds are the fish of the air, does that make us normal? If everyone dies, why was I born with such feminine hands? How does the strawberry feel when it's told it's not in season? Do water and spring kiss or quarrel when they meet? Do balloons count each poisoned breath? Or is it only one long sigh? Will ironing out his wrinkles make him appear any younger? When will today finally be tomorrow? Let's give English 3303 a hand. And I want to just invite up quickly, just 2 short responses. So I asked them to actually take one of these questions and not try to answer it, but respond in it the way we think Neruda might respond, with your whole self, with an attitude of sort of curious inquiry. So Marika Becker is going to come up first, and then Daniel Garrick's going to follow her.
What do dream catchers do when they catch your dreams? Do they laugh because there is no hope, or do they sigh with relief because they have no dreams of their own?
Does a star fall, or does it jump? When I first saw my favorite bird, later, the skydiver of 32nd Street, it certainly seemed like he jumped, or heaved, pressing his wings against invisible somethings and climbing into the sky. When I was a kid, my leaps were indistinguishable little failures, either up and back down soon, or else my teeth met pavement, or rock, or sand, or pillow. So I became an acrobat to learn how to climb and not fall, and rest there in that thick, motionless sea.
About Neruda be without poetry. Now, the person I'm going to introduce to you now, Bill Fisher, is one of the people that made this exhibit possible in a variety of ways. And Bill is somebody that I had met years ago when I first moved to San Antonio. And then we kind of lost touch. And then I was talking to Marion Ettinger about a year and a half ago about the possibility of doing this exhibit. And he says, well, you have to contact this fellow Bill Fisher, because he is like the guy in San Antonio who knows more about Pablo Neruda and has more cool Neruda stuff than anybody else that you'll ever meet in the course of your lifetime. And it turns out to be true. I'd already met him, but when I had met him some years ago, I had no idea that we shared this passion for Neruda. And so Bill is going to talk with us a little bit about this exhibit and a little bit about Neruda and Siqueiros. He's a native San Antonian. He got his BA at Rice, where he majored in Spanish and history. He got away from us. I guess he wanted to get out of San Antonio at least for a couple of years. He did a semester abroad in Santiago, Chile, like many of our students at Trinity University have done, in the early 1990s. And he fell in love with Chile and its culture, especially its poetry, and what's not to love. He then went on to the UT School of Law and practices in the field of employee benefits and exempt organizations at a local firm, Cox, Smith, and Matthews. And students, let this be a lesson to you. You can go on and have a successful professional career even if your passion is poetry. Indeed. In the spare time between work and family life, he has a wife and 2 kids. He is an avid book collector and a student of literary and publishing history. One of his main focuses is Latin American literature with a special interest in Pablo Neruda. This goes for both collecting and study. He has amassed a large Neruda collection, some of which is with us here tonight, and loves opportunities to share his knowledge, as when he curated a major Neruda exhibit at the De Goyler Rare Books Library in 2004 in honor of its centenary. And tonight, although it commemorates a more sober anniversary, he will be talking to us some more about Pablo Neruda and his artistic companion, David Alfaro Siqueiros. Bill Fisher.
Thank you for your introduction, but please, I don't want to hear 20 years down the road someone gave up poetry to become a lawyer. That's just too much to lay on me.
You became a lawyer and you still love poetry, and it made a difference in your life.
All right, good save. Well, good evening to everyone, and thank you to the poets, poetry professors, poetry students, Jenny, Marie, and Daniel. That was a fantastic way to open the night. And thanks again to David and Aaron and the other organizers of this series of events that goes under the name Chile Canta al Mundo. The title refers, of course, to song, especially in the context of the Nueva Canción, which was the movement that really flourished under the Unidad Popular in Chile. But it applies equally well to Neruda, especially when we talk about Canto General. This is a poem cycle that he denominates as a song. It is a general song. I'm going to make some brief remarks and then get to the music and let you all get in and see the art. But what I will do is give you a brief overview of Neruda's themes leading up to the Canto General, then some gossip about its composition and publication, and finally his collaboration with Mexican muralist David Alfaro Siqueiros, whose work you can already get a sneak peek of through this these glass doors. As Jenny mentioned, there's many Nerudas. He began, as some of you may know, as a love poet, writing passionate poems of love, in many cases unrequited love or love gone bad. I think probably half of the 20 love songs are ultimately depressing, but it's still a good book. From there, he moved to a more surrealist vein and ultimately political poetry, which was inspired by his stay in Spain. He left poetry briefly to work in diplomacy, and he was a diplomat posted to Spain shortly before the Civil War. He was there when it broke out. Some of his best friends were imprisoned, died, or executed. Choose your verb. It was a very shocking end to his happy days in Spain, and it caused a change in his poetry. He wrote a series of politically committed poems about the Spanish Civil War, and worked for a while aiding Spanish refugees to immigrate to America. He followed them back to America himself, and he turned his poetic focus back to America, and specifically to Chile. He was posted to Mexico, still as a diplomat, but I think he spent more time writing poems than he did stamping visas. And the poems he worked on when he first got back to America were about Chile. He conceived of a poem cycle called Canto General de Chile. It began as a very focused series of poems about his homeland. its people, its flora, its fauna, its natural beauty. But before long, he expanded it to include all of Latin America, its history, its villains, its heroes, influenced by foreign corporations and foreign governments, and ultimately exalting the common man and expressing a vision of hope for the new world. It's perhaps not coincidental that at the same time he was expanding the scope of his poetic project, he had joined the Chilean Communist Party. He was elected senator in the late 40s, and before too long found out that you can have plenty of trouble internally without any external influences in a country. The Chilean president, which the Communist Party helped elect in the late 40s, outlawed the party. Neruda cried foul in a speech from the Senate floor, which quickly resulted in his being stripped of diplomatic immunity, and he went underground. And during that year he spent underground, he finished the poems of the Canto General, and then in this very picturesque story, he escaped over the Andes. Sometimes you hear it that he went on foot, other times you hear that yes, he really rode a horse, but still it was the Andes he crossed. And by 49, he wound up in Mexico City, where he attended an international peace conference, and he decided to stay there to see the Canto General in print. This was no small feat. You can see through the doors under this acrylic cover is the book itself. This is a big, honking book of poetry, which took him 5 to 6 years to write all the poems, and then about a year and a half to raise the funds to publish. He did it the old-fashioned way by getting advanced subscriptions, and you will see what a good salesman he was. There's an invitation also in that case to the book signing. They had this very, very fancy event where he was signing books on a piano with this big silver candelabra on it. There's great photographs of it. At the same time, he wanted to involve the other arts in his poetic project, and he invited his 3 friends, Mexican muralists José Clemente Orozco, Diego Rivera, and David Alfaro Siqueiros to illustrate the book. Orozco died in 49, so it went to just Rivera and Siqueiros. Would that we could all settle on such illustrious collaborators, but that's who he wound up with, and he gave both artists advanced galleys of his book and asked them to choose their theme. And you will see on the wall, these color illustrations are the end papers that were used in the first edition of the Canto General. The one beneath is Diego Rivera. He chose to illustrate pre-Columbian history, and you will have scenes from the Aztecs and the Maya and the Incas. And Siqueiros elected to look to the future. And he did this wonderful illustration of a faceless man emerging from what? From sand, from the Big Bang, from something. I'll go on a limb here. I know more about books and poetry than art, but I would say that's the metaphorical hombre nuevo, who's being born from the ferment of 20th century upheavals. So the book, you can see, is there in the case. After that was done, that was printed in 1950. It was a long time before Neruda and Siqueiros crossed paths again. Actually, let me back up. There's an interesting story about when they first met. According to Neruda, it was in 1940 when he first arrived in Mexico. 4 days before he arrived there, Trotsky was assassinated. And at the time, Siqueiros was on the lam. He had led an initial failed attempt to assassinate Trotsky, and he was hiding out in the hills. About 2 months after Neruda arrived to Mexico, Trotsky was captured, and Neruda, according to his memoirs, was summoned to the presidential palace in Mexico City and asked to help spirit Siqueiros out of the country, which he did. Without the permission of his superiors, he granted him a visa. Here he was actually working and doing diplomatic work, but still in the service of art, because he helped Siqueiros escape from Mexico and go to Chile, where he moved to Chillán in the Central Valley and did a wonderful mural in a public school there called Muerte al Invasor, about native resistance to the Spanish conquistadores. This had long-lasting repercussions for Neruda, the most minor of which was he was suspended without pay. But more long-term, this is the old canard that was raised again and again. Oh, he was complicit in the Trotsky assassination. He's a bad person. And surprisingly, the quarters where this objection was raised was the United States. There was a biography of Neruda, which was published in 2004 in the 100th centenary of his birth, and it revealed that the CIA helped lead a whisper campaign in 1966 to keep Neruda from being awarded the Nobel Prize. Apparently he was a front runner at the time, but the CIA directly and through some cultural organizations that it sponsored got in contact with a lot of the voters in Sweden and ultimately had the prize delayed 5 years, but delayed at the time. So there was a very interesting meeting. Neruda's defense was, well, he'd never met Trotsky before he arrived in 1940, and at that time he was on the lam. Well, I can tell you that's false. They met at least in Paris in 38 and 39, and apparently Neruda had had an affair with Siqueiros' wife in the 30s in Buenos Aires. I guess that doesn't mean he had met Siqueiros, but there was some contact there. The details are a little sketchy. There are competing versions of the events in the memoirs of the participants. Anyhow, that was jumping back in time. Then we get to the Canto General in 50. After that, their paths diverged again until the 60s. Neruda came back through Mexico, found Siqueiros in jail one more time, tried to spring him. It was unsuccessful. His back-channel communications with the Mexican government didn't pan out. When he left, he wrote a poem called A Siqueiros al Partir, talking about the injustice of Siqueiros being jailed. And in a wonderful exhibit of how poetry can be a political act and involve the whole community, he printed it up on a bunch of posters and had them pasted on the walls of Mexico City streets. I purchased one on a Mexico City street from the stall of a book vendor, one of my happy book collecting stories, and I believe it's hiding back in here somewhere, and you will see that. The next time they met was under happier circumstances. Everyone was out of jail. No one was having any affairs with anyone's spouse. And with all the free time that gave them, they decided to collaborate on an artistic project, which was a new version of the Canto General, a fine arts edition to be published by a New York lawyer. For the record, let it show. It was a lawyer who financed it in New York City. And it was a multinational affair. The publisher was in New York City, Neruda was in Chile, Siqueiros was in Cuernavaca. By this time he was in his 70s. I'm almost done, David. And it was to be printed in Paris. It was such a multinational affair, it was almost fated to have a miscommunication. Siqueiros did the plates in Mexico, sent them off to Paris where they were printed, and then the lithographs, which you can see some on the walls, the black and whites, were sent to New York, and they were twice the size of the book. The book publisher had given the dimensions of the book open wide. It's a very large book. In the technical lingo, it's a double elephant folio. And Siqueiros didn't understand that he was only supposed to do half the size of the open dimensions to do one page. I think this was a good thing. The publisher was upset because then the illustrations could not be bound in with the book and he had to pay extra to issue them in a separate case. I think it's nice. The landscape version, the landscape size offers Siqueiros a better palette to do some really striking work. And I will refrain from making further art critical comments, but I will let you judge whether you like the format. But the other point is, since they weren't bound in the book, they can be framed and hung individually and appreciated by the public. And without further ado, I will stand down so you may appreciate them sooner. Thank you.
Well, it's the general song, the Canto General, and we've been doing a lot with Chile Canta al Mundo, and you would be El Mundo tonight. And we are very, very fortunate to have two fine músicos y cantantes chilenos with us, in addition to the people who sang last night, and with the people who will sing again tomorrow night. We will get to hear a couple of songs tonight, so don't miss the concert. Esperanza Peace and Justice Center. I also see somebody here in the audience. Could you come up from the museum? Let me introduce to you your title is the archivist.
Assistant Curator.
The Assistant Curator of Latin America is Fullerton. Latin American Art. And she is one of the people that has made this all possible for us this evening. Thank you. Does anyone want to introduce her tonight? She really takes some credit where credit is due. So we're going to hear some music now, a couple of songs from Marci Valdivieso and Marci Manriquez and Ricardo Valdivieso. They're known as Dua Muxa. And one other thing I should just mention is that there's one very sad note that has some happiness to it, which is we had invited to be with us here this evening and this week Rafael Manriquez. Rafael Manriquez was a wonderful singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, composer from Chile who lived in the Bay Area for many, many years, had accepted our invitation to be with us, and died last year, passed away very unexpectedly, and which gave us great sadness. But the one, for me at least, silver lining of all is this, that I discovered that he has a daughter who is also a wonderful singer, songwriter, musician, who also performs some of his songs and some of her own songs, including some of the music that her father some of the poetry of Pablo Neruda that her father put to music. So please join me in welcoming Marci Manriquez and Ricardo Valdivieso.
This thing about being shorter than most of you. And I'm wearing heels. Still not problem. Perfect. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We are here to honor the exhibit of Siqueiros and Neruda that were held so warmly in my father's heart. My father was Rafael Manriquez. And he published 2 CDs of music using the poetry of Neruda. One with the sonetos, 100 sonetos de amor para Matilde, and the other one was a collection of various different works of Neruda. And so we're going to try and include 2 of his sonetos work, and then one from the Canto General, and try to do him justice. So this is for you and for Rafael Manriquez. Partamos con el medio de la gente. Estoy tosiendo. So I don't know if Lichi went through the poetry of this one. She played it this morning, I think. I'm a member of Grupo Raíz, which was a group that my father has, and who has also recorded this song. He's also here with us tonight, although she's not playing. She will be playing tomorrow. And I heard that she's already done the song, but it says, "In the middle of the earth, I will separate the emeralds to find you. And you will be copying the stems with a ink pen, with a water ink pen, with a messenger water ink pen." I'm just doing this right off of the thing, so just a little bit of those words for you.
Las esmeraldas para divisarle, y tú estarás copiando las espigas con una pluma de agua mensajera. Qué mundo, qué profundo perejil, que nade navegando en la dulzura, y tú tal vez y yo tal vez topacio, ya no habrá división en las campanas. Ya no habrá sino todo el aire libre, las manzanas llevadas por el viento, el suculento libro en la enramada, y allí donde respiran los claveles, juntaremos un traje que resista la eternidad de un beso victorioso. Ya no habrá división en las campanas, ya no habrá sino todo el aire libre, las manzanas llevadas por el viento, el suculento libro en la enramada, y allí donde respiran los claveles, juntaremos un traje que resista la eternidad de un beso victorioso.
Muchas gracias. So when I was very young, yeah, we all were at some point, my dad had this group, Grupo Raíz, which supported the Chilean resistance and was very, very political in the United States, got a lot of support. And of course, Neruda and his lyrics were part of the work that he did. And so this is a song that I'm going to do a cappella, see if I can do it justice, from Canto General, from the album called Un Solo Camino, which I think was first published in 1980 by Grupo Raíz. I'm not sure that it was ever published by the Smithsonian, who owns the other two CDs that they published, but Un Solo Camino was a work primarily of my father's songs, and the music was Quique Cruz, Lichi Fuentes, Rafael Manriquez, Peña Torres, Dennis Schmidt, maybe I'm missing somebody, but I think those are the folks that made that music happen here in the United States and in Europe, and thanks to audiences like yourselves, were able to get the word out about what was happening in Chile. So, dame un similar. Vamos a ver. Educación del cacique.
Lautaro era una flecha delgada, elástico y azul, fue nuestro padre. Fue su primera edad, solo silencio. Su adolescencia fue dominio. Su juventud fue un viento dirigido. Se preparó como una larga lanza. Acostumbró los pies en las cascadas, educó la cabeza en las espinas, ejecutó las pruebas del guanaco, vivió en las madrigueras de la nieve, acechó la comida de las águilas, arañó los secretos del peñasco, entretuvo los pétalos del fuego, se amamantó de primavera fría, se quemó en las gargantas infernales, fue cazador entre las aves crueles, se tiñó sus mantos de victorias, leyó las agresiones de la noche, sostuvo los derrumbos del azufre. Se hizo velocidad, luz repentina. lentitudes del otoño, trabajó en las guaridas invisibles, durmió en las sábanas del ventisquero, igualó la conducta de las flechas, bebió la sangre agreste en los caminos, arrebató el tesoro de las olas, se hizo amenaza como un dios sombrío. Comió en cada cocina de su pueblo, aprendió el alfabeto del relámpago. Olfateó las cenizas esparcidas, envolvió el corazón con pieles negras, descifró el espiral hilo del humo, se construyó de fibras taciturnas, se aceitó como el alma del oliva, se hizo cristal de transparencia dura. Estudió para viento huracanado, se combatió hasta apagar la sangre. Entonces fue digno de su pueblo. Solo entonces fue digno de su pueblo. Solo entonces fue digno de su pueblo. Solo entonces fue digno de su pueblo.
Thank you. Thank you. Canto General, Alfaro, if you could understand those words, my God, what a piece of work. We're going to end with something much, much lighter, and it is Soneto 66, Sonnet Number 66, which is a love poem, one of many, por Matilde Urrutia.
Sino porque te quiero y de quererte a no quererte llego y de esperarte cuando no te espero pasa mi corazón del frío al fuego. Te quiero solo porque a ti te quiero, te odio sin fin y odiándote te ruego, y la medida de mi amor viajero es no verte y amarte como un ciego. Tal vez consumirá la luz de enero, su rayo cruel mi corazón entero, robándome la llave del sosiego. En esta historia solo yo me muero y moriré de amor porque te quiero amor, a sangre y fuego. Y moriré de amor porque te quiero amor, a sangre y a fuego. Te quiero solo porque a ti te quiero, te odio sin fin y odiándote te ruego, y la medida de mi amor viajero que prueba mi corazón entero y robándome la llave del sosiego. En esta historia solo yo me muero y moriré de amor porque te quiero amor, a sangre y a fuego y moriré de amor porque te quiero amor, a sangre y a fuego.
Muchísimas gracias, Marcy y Ricardo. Tuamuxa will be playing tomorrow night at the Esperanza Center along with Vichy Fuentes, Emilio Weinsinger, and Elfrio Alma. Well, now it's time for us to open the doors and let you in to see the art and the poetry inside the Michael and Noemi Neidorff Art Gallery.